we're going to thanks very much. We're going to walk through a review of session number 1. If some of you were not registered for session number 1, you won't know where this session came from. So we're going to go through a high-level overview of the guidance we got from members and non-members about how actively involved we should be in this space as an organization. We're going to walk you through the federal and provincial hydrogen strategies as they exist today that create the background context for us moving a national joint procurement and hydrogen fuel cell bus forward. We're going to walk you through, my colleague Tatash is going to walk you through the outcomes of our survey and interviews with the transit agencies that put up their hands, indicating they do want us to move in this direction. We're going to then turn to our colleague Jessica, who's going to walk you through the FCEB joint procurement model that we have launched for battery electric buses and its applicability to fuel cell buses in 2023 onward. And then we will have a short rapid fire roundtable from our members and non-members on the line today, basically to indicate whether you think we should be involved, because we think we should be involved. And that means a big business division development at our consortium for 2023 to 2026. And then we will conclude. The materials provided today and reviewed today will be provided to all registered participants, including the PowerPoint, the recording, and of course, the minutes. We'll go to the next slide. So just to start off, I'm going to call the meeting to order at 1:33 p.m. Eastern. And as a review of the last session, so this last session was held a few months ago. As an update, since that time, if you were registered at that session, you would have received the 20 to 30 page long document that had the detailed minutes of conversation. We had robust roundtables and focus group feedback at that session. And we reviewed the state of the landscape on the hydrogen fuel cell bus in Canada at that time. But there were 4 core outcomes from our transit agencies and members and non-members on the line at the time. We had asked them, should QTRIC be involved in moving beyond our Mississauga bus project into a national landscape of identifying cheap green hydrogen supply chains for fuel cell electric buses? Should we be involved in launching a joint procurement initiative using our FCEB model to support a fuel cell bus, electric bus round of turnkey joint procurement nationally? And the intention here would be us using the FCEB model that's now underway to support high volume, low cost green hydrogen procurement and high volume, low cost fuel cell bus procurement. Increasingly important, because if you were at our conference last week, you would have heard, as New Flyer indicated, the buses are now about 26% more expensive than they were last year. So very expensive in the landscape of inflation, becoming more important that there is high volume, low cost pricing. Third, we heard from our members and non-members at the first session that we should enable additional participants, if possible, in the My Way fuel cell bus project. Now, that project is a 10 fuel cell bus project with the city of Mississauga and local green hydrogen, where we have obtained and are working to obtain a combination of municipal, federal, and provincial funding to get that show on the road. It would be the first and only green hydrogen fuel supplied fuel cell bus project in Canada. The intention there is, should we add to that constellation across the GTHA? And the answer was yes, we should, if we can do it. And the fourth is QTRIC should be actively involved in shaping federal and provincial policies around getting funds for transit, specifically transit deployment of fuel cell buses and green hydrogen into those provincial strategies. And the majority of those strategies do not have money for transit fuel cell buses. They have the plan and the goal, but not the money attached to it. Those were the 4 big pieces of insight we heard. If you really want the detailed components, if you are registered here today, you will get a copy of the minutes from the first session, as well as the minutes from today. So with that, we're going to go forward, and I'm just going to ask folks if you can self-mute. We've set this up in a Zoom line that allows us to do roundtable focus groups, but as a result, we can't automatically mute you for yourself. So if you can mute yourself to avoid any background noise, we will appreciate that. If you can also rename yourself so that you can add your corporate name next to your name, that will help, given that, as I said, we have over 80 people registered. And at some point, they're going to be joining, at least a large chunk of them, in the next hour. So we're going to start off with the whirlwind tour of the federal provincial strategies underway. And this is research that we did with our partners at Crestview, who do our government relations work with us. If you are a member of QTRIC, then you'll get these regular updates internal to our members meetings. If you're not a member and you're joining here today from the worldwide community, then this is a value proposition, value add that you get as a result of being invited into this session today. So we'll go forward to the first slide. And just to walk folks through these elements, first we're going to start off by looking at some of the targets. We'll go forward one slide. And here, if you see the federal hydrogen strategy targets, many of you know this already, but if you don't know this and it's new for you, within Canada, there is the estimation that the hydrogen landscape is at least a $50 billion domestic market, that there are currently, in some way, shape, or form, about 300,000 jobs in this economy in the country already. That is competing with the automotive market. So that is not an insignificant number of jobs to be discussing. And then about 30% of the energy should be fueled by hydrogen. The intention there is that there would be 5,000 fuel cell electric vehicles on the road in some way, shape, or form by 2050. So the goal there is that there would be, by 2050, $50 billion worth of money into the economy and sloshing about in the economy attached to the hydrogen landscape, 300,000 jobs, and at least 30% of our energy specifically in transportation. We go forward a slide. If we take a look at some of the core tenets involved in this particular strategy, you will see here that there are intentions here around strategic partnerships, de-risking investments, enabling, the core ones rather. There are eight pillars, but we've pulled out the core 6 that are relevant to us. So the first is strategic partnerships. The second is de-risking investments. The third is awareness within there, and innovation is the fourth. The fifth is enabling policies and regulations. The sixth is regional blueprints, and seventh, attached to that in our view, is international markets. And the eighth is codes and standards. Of some of these elements, the first around strategic partnerships, according to the federal government, as part of its 32 recommendations to get to those 2050 goals, is to use existing and new partnerships strategically to collaborate and map the future of hydrogen. That's what we're all involved in doing right now. There's a lot of work at NRCan, but a lot of our organizations, including QTRIC, are actively involved in that mapping. The second is de-risking of investments, and there's the establishment of funding programs, long-term policies, and business models to encourage industry and government to invest in this space. Many of you have been active with us asking for hydrogen fuel cell bus technologies to be included in the Zero Emissions Transit Fund, which it is, for it to be included in the Canada Infrastructure Bank, which it is, but in practice is not, because there is not a savings over diesel, and that it be included in NRCan funding and cost offsets for investments, which it is. The next big thing, of course, we'll talk about at the provincial level. Next is awareness, leading at the national level to ensure individuals and communities are aware of hydrogen safety. I thought those days were done where people thought about the Hindenburg, but apparently that is not done. I thought that was dead and buried into the ground about 5 years ago, but apparently that is still a community concern. And this is just what happens when you're in the weeds and losing sight of the fact that not everybody's been talking this language for the last half decade. So awareness building. Innovation is the fourth, and that includes taking action to support R&D through universities and industry, developing some research priorities at the federal government level, and fostering collaboration between academic and industry stakeholders to ensure Canada keeps its competitive edge in hydrogen fuel cell technologies. I'm proud to say QTRIC funds a number of projects in this space with universities like University of Waterloo, and we have actively played a hand in producing intellectual property that feeds into corporate innovation at Ballard, among other industry partners. So this is very important to us. The fifth is enabling those policies and regulations that ensures hydrogen's integrated into clean energy roadmaps and strategies at all levels. For QTRIC, what this means is making sure that the standards are in place, and if they're not, motivating those standards to be in place so that you can store hydrogen indoors or outdoors in a transit facility, and you can store it next to, or fuel buses next to, super high power 450 kilowatt to 600 kilowatt chargers for your battery electric buses. That kind of integrated standards landscape doesn't exist yet, but it will need to exist in the next 5 years to enable zero emissions fleets. That next is the regional blueprints, implementing a multi-level collaborative government effort to facilitate the development of regional hydrogen blueprints. And the idea there is, of course, the federal government serving as a convener, which we are fully in support of, because the next level of convention is, of course, getting provinces not only to have hydrogen strategies, but to put money into them. The seventh and eighth is international markets, working with international partners to ensure the global push for clean fuels. This is increasingly becoming important to QTRIC because we have international hydrogen players now knocking on our door saying, hey, we can produce and deliver green hydrogen or cheap hydrogen to you, better, faster, and quicker than your domestic companies and providers can. Brave new world and landscape for us, so we're going to have to figure this one out. And lastly, those codes and standards that we referred to, modernizing existing codes and standards in order to accommodate the rapidly changing industry and to remove the barriers to deployment that are codes and standards based. And I already referred to one of those as critical. So if we go forward to the next slide, I'm going to move through now some of the core elements that are at issue across the strategy and into the provinces. Here we have the statement that rail, marine, and aviation applications are well suited to hydrogen. So this is what the federal government has indicated. Of course, what we want to see is transit is an immediate and obvious application, and it seems to be underrepresented in the federal strategy. If we go forward to a new slide, the next slide rather, you can see some of the active opportunities underway that we are currently exploring at QTRIC, the Clean Growth Fund, the New Innovation and Investment Agency, tax credits, the Canada Infrastructure Bank's hydrogen mandate, and the clean electricity initiatives that are embedded within Natural Resources Canada's own budget. There's hundreds of millions and billions of dollars associated with these initiatives. There's also medium and heavy duty zero emissions vehicles program, and there is the commitment federally to phasing out oil, gas, and coal activities. All of these federal activities point in the right direction, and yet we still have struggled to get the right amount of money out the door for a fuel cell bus project in my way. So if we're going to expand this nationally, the opportunities to leverage these programs and help the federal government figure out how to get the money into transit specifically for green hydrogen offsetting. If we move forward now in the last component, this is the Ontario overview. And as a high level on the Ontario overview, if we go to the next slide, you can see here that a bit of a nothing burger marked by zero open funding programs. So this is our position at QTRIC right now. It is something that we have flagged to Minister Caroline Mulroney. We've flagged it to other ministers provincially in Ontario. There is a hydrogen strategy, but there's actually no money in it for transit and public mobility, and very little money actually even identified yet, if any, for distinct projects. That is starting to change and emerge, but nonetheless, it's a serious issue for us that there's a strategy, but there's no money specifically to get a project like My Ways out the door with a green hydrogen supplier like Enbridge and Cummins and Markham. It's a great Canadian Ontario story, and yet there isn't the ability to do it without the provincial funds. If we go to the next slide, at the provincial level, though, there are aspects in terms of government-backed initiatives to promote hydrogen. So there are the hydroelectric facilities initiatives underway in terms of exemptions. There are electricity rates that the Minister of Energy is working to ensure are at a lower rate for hydrogen producers, so that production in, say, the proposed hub at Atura in Niagara would result in low-cost green hydrogen. There is Bruce Power undertaking a feasibility study on using zero carbon energy from the Bruce nuclear generating system to produce some low carbon hydrogen. And there are, of course, the hydrogen hubs that the Ministry of Energy is identifying alongside the federal government, which should create volume and increase, or rather decrease the price over time. But those hubs are several years away from being deployed, and on a best case scenario, might not be deployed for several years. So having said all of that, there's the narrative, there's the story, but there isn't yet the deployment. I'm not going to spend much more time going over this other than to go forward. We know at QTRIC that if Ontario Rail were to get involved, rail demand almost overnight would create the volume and demand that would drop the price point. But right now at the Ontario level, there is no mention of rail transportation. In the presentation, I will just move through the next slides. In Quebec, of course, there is an intense focus on green hydrogen now emerging. There isn't the pickup, though, in the transit industry. So we'll leave it there for the moment. It's an interesting conundrum in Quebec, a producer and a supporter of green hydrogen, but not the adoption at the transit level. If we go forward to the next slide, you can see the hydrogen timeline for the sector in Quebec, according to the government in terms of the investments. It's a great big opportunity, and we're looking forward to working with our Quebec transit agencies to see how we can support them in moving in this direction, should they wish to at the municipal level. But what we're actively looking at is the producers of hydrogen in Quebec to see if they're willing to export outside of Quebec to the rest of the provinces where transit agencies have put up their hand. If you go forward to the next slide, We have natural resources and energy capital funding. This is creating incentives that is supporting production specifically in Quebec. And so again, if you go forward one more slide, you'll see there's no mention of rail. And the reason we're raising rail here in a bus webinar is because the volume and the demand that comes with hydrogen rail. Lastly, if we move to British Columbia, in the British Columbia landscape, if you go forward one slide, there's 63 actions organized over several themes, a real leader in the hydrogen landscape. Go forward one more slide. You can see how the BC government has intended to support this. And it has been a long time coming, but TransLink is an active now supporter in that hydrogen landscape, exploring it as part of its decarbonization goals. And if you go forward one slide, there are active funding programs, not perfectly aligned with the transit deployments, but BC is probably the best positioned in the country to deploy provincial funds into hydrogen fuel cell bus applications at a substantial level because of the integration of their government strategy with funding and federal alignment. Lastly, if you do go forward in British Columbia, there is deploying of green hydrogen energy sources in rail transportation is being discussed as part of the province's planned pilot projects for rail. So this is a game changer. That takes us through a high-level overview of the landscape of hydrogen strategies in the country that we're playing within. Not perfect, but not half bad, and way better than we were 5 years ago. With that, I'm going to go to my colleague Tatash, who's going to walk you through what our transit agencies have said to us recently about, given this context, should we move forward or not? Over to you, Tatash.
Thank you so much, Jessica. With the interview, what we did is that QTRIC conducted interviews with transit agencies with the aim to understand the current status, the opportunity challenges that they're facing in the fuel cell bus technology, given the current landscape. And the QTRIC's aim is to conduct these interviews and to share the results of the interview to inform not only Infrastructure Canada, but the ways in which QTRICs can support, and as well as amalgamate these reports together and send it to the interview members and government members and transit agencies. Next slide, please. So QTRIC reached out to 5 leading transit agencies who are at various stages of planning, and between November 15th and December 1st, QTRIC conducted these interviews, and QTRIC also plans to interview 5 additional transit agencies who are part of that list, and before the end of Q1 of 2023, we will be sharing that information as well. So thank you to the agencies who have taken your time. It was a 1-hour detailed conversation, which was very informative. QTRIC aims to amalgamate, as I mentioned, these data to share among agencies, government bodies, and QTRIC's members. Next slide, please. So we asked a few questions to the clients. These are open-ended questions, and it all ranged from different stages. So has the organization started the hydrogen fuel electric bus planning process? So all the 3 agencies mentioned that they are at various stages of planning and adopting various planning strategy. So as Yosfa mentioned, there are some which are provincially led, whereas transit agency comes from the provincial direction of how the planning is being conducted, whereas there are some agencies which have completed feasibility, are piloting and going into procurement. So all transit agencies have an understanding, but that was a common theme, that the battery electric bus cannot be a sustainable sole solution for large fleet electrification, just because the complexity of the fueling charge infrastructure can also be very expensive over the years, even with hydrogen, green hydrogen as an initial seed expensive. So they're doing this whole balance, and this was a common theme. Next slide, please. What stage of planning is your organization at for hydrogen FCEBs? And can you please describe? So with that question, we already know in the landscape, and you have seen in the ZEP database, we have documented MyWay, Winnipeg Transit, Edmonton Transit are leading the hydrogen landscape. Some of them are procuring, some of them are piloting. And as hydrogen is especially promising for cold climate, our participants mentioned that it is a very suitable technology that they're planning to adopt. And some transit agencies are in a process of building a robust business case for funding opportunities. Funding opportunities are differing from province to province. When we did this interview, we interviewed people from different provinces. So therefore, the planning processes are at different stages. So for example, one transit agency are at a stage of retrofitting and looking at their garages. Some of them are just starting the feasibility study, whereas some of them are building a blueprint and business case for funding. Next slide, please. Local utility engagement was on one of our question and a point of discussion. So transit agencies who were interviewed already has a strong relationship with their local utility providers. This is because most of them have completed or have done a strong battery electric bus electrification planning, and they started a few years ago. Therefore, with this, they have already built a relationship. However, transit agencies are still involving some other additional stakeholders because it is a different technology which requires different supply chain. And transit agencies are receiving offers from both local hydrogen suppliers and from suppliers across the country. So one of the transit agency that interviewed, they're saying that there's a lot of opportunity. So in the future, they're going to come up with an RFP, and that's how they'll engage these stakeholders. Transit agencies are also in conversation with manufacturers like New Flyer, who are currently the only FCEB manufacturers in the country. But if you were at the QTRIX conference, you might have heard there are other manufacturers who might be making some announcements early next year with their new technology of fuel cell buses. Next slide, please. To what extent has your council and city and region or province been part of this planning process? Like Josifa mentioned, gave a little quick snapshot of different provinces' strategy. All transit agencies responded that the provinces or the local government are well aligned on the investments in hydrogen, and agencies want to make sure they are involving governors and people who are going to fund these projects to develop a business case for further funding. So some of them who are the initial stages of planning, and the direction is coming from the provincial level, they haven't involved their local governance and municipalities yet. They're just waiting for that larger strategy to unfold. However, the ones who are initiating from a bottom-up approach, where they're starting the transit agencies, they are aligned with their government, and the conversation are way ahead. So with the report, you will be also receiving which transit agencies are at what stage in details. This is an anonymized version. For some transit agencies, the council and the other organizations are at initial planning stage, as I mentioned, and some organizations relying both on provincial funding. The funding Josifa has already covered. That is a gap that we are looking into, and the transit agencies did highlight that. Next slide, please. And these are some of the questions. Is anything else that you would like to add? So some of the themes that we captured is the misconception on the hydrogen technology. One of our participants was very detailed with this particular response, saying that currently there are myths and misconceptions about hydrogen technology that needs to be busted. And QTRIC can play an important role in informing and sharing and educating agencies and government bodies. For example, the combustibility of the hydrogen gas, how much safe it is, and things like that. Transit agencies with large fleets, organizations with large fleets, they mentioned that FCEBs are likely to have less need for significant fueling or energy infrastructure, as charging infrastructure for battery electric buses on site in transit centers can be expensive. Next slide. Another thing that was touched upon was the labor shortage. FCEB is a great technology to bridge that gap. With the current shortage of labor due to global economy, FCEB is a viable option. And then finally, adaptability to fuel cell technology. The ability to achieve the outcome with hydrogen electric vehicles are reasonably similar to that of diesel. So the transition, the not only the technological transition, the workforce and the socioeconomic transition is going to be much significantly more comfortable. Next slide, please. All right, I think with that, I will pass back to Josifa.
Thanks so much, Tatash. A good overview of what transit agencies are saying to us right now, solidifying and codifying what we already thought we knew, but it's starting to get fleshed out in details. With that, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is great. We're going to now turn to our colleague, Jessica Hansen, who's going to walk folks through the FCEB Joint Procurement Initiative. And just to give you all context, we know now the strategies are out there. It's not 2016, it's 2022 to 2023. So we have federal strategies with some money. We have some targets out there. We have a bunch of provinces that have strategies. We have a lot of transit agencies saying they now get it. They've done the feasibility work. They realize that they need this stuff in combination with battery electrification. They're not quite sure where to go. And now we all know there's not nearly enough green hydrogen being produced to solve the need. And that which is being produced is really expensive. So we know that now. That is a good place for us to be. It's way further ahead than where we were half a decade ago. So then the next step is, let's say we have transit agencies saying to us, yeah, QTRIC, you should pull together TransLink and Edmonton and Winnipeg and Brampton and Halifax, and you should do a joint procurement of 100 fuel cell buses and find the supply chain to solve them all. What is the model we would use to do that? Happily, in the last 3 years, we developed the FCEB initiative. It launched and was incorporated officially this year as our first spin-off of QTRIC. It is fully independent of QTRIC, as Jessica will explain, and it is our first spin-off company, and its only job is joint procurement of zero emissions technology on turnkey solutions. So with that, I'm going to turn to Jessica, who's going to explain to you the model and the corporation as it exists for battery electric bus right now, and then we'll come back to the fact that this is the model we would use if in fact we go down this pathway in the next year for fuel cell bus. Over to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Josipa. As mentioned, my name is Jessica Hansen. I'm a project manager at Initiatives at QTRIC, and I've been working over the recent months to help launch FCEB. Next slide, please. So quickly, what is FCEB? It is an independent nonprofit spinoff corporation really focused on procurement of zero emissions buses. Independent and standalone, Canada's first national joint procurement program for electrified public transit infrastructure with a focus on turnkey zero emissions transit solutions for small to medium-sized agencies. So the intention is to provide uniquely synergistic, comprehensive, and cost-effective process for joint procurement nationwide. This is really unique in the sense that we are spinning off, as Josip said, but also that there is an opportunity for small to medium-sized transit agencies from across Canada to engage in ways that they may have not been able to before. Next slide, please. So as part of the spinoff as an independent corporation, FCEB has established its independent board. The term to start is 2022 through 2023, and I'm happy to share the composition of the board. We've got Blair Allen from Grand River Transit, Chris Hill from Guelph Transit, Eddie Robar from Edmonton Transit, and Ralph Nielsen from TransLink. They had their first in-person board meeting at the QTRIC conference last week, and I'm happy to confirm that we have a bit more information in terms of the composition of the board. We have the chair, who will be Chris Hill. We have the vice chair, Eddie Robar, and Blair Allen will be the treasurer, and they will be providing guidance and leadership for the governance of FCEB, independent from QTRIC, through the 2022 to 2023 term. Next slide, please. To that end, we have to have clients. Transit agencies who are interested in procuring these turnkey transit solutions. And for the first round, as of this week, we have 2 clients. We have Burlington Transit with approximately 60 to 70 buses within their fleet. And we have London Transit with around 200 to 220 buses in their fleet. This is unique again, because to call back to what we said about small to medium-sized transit agencies, it's provided an opportunity for them to enter procurement in ways they may not have been able to independently. To that end, as part of the project's management, we have representatives from both of those transit agencies on FCEB's project steering committee. We have Sue Connor from Burlington Transit and Kelly Plesney from the London Transit Commission, and they've been providing ongoing guidance in terms of getting the project off the ground, its growth and development, helping us to really understand the needs of transit agencies who would like to become clients and what we can do in order to get the project off the ground. To that end, we are still inviting transit agencies who would like to become clients, participants in this first round. The deadline for interested transit agencies is December 31st, so you still have a few more weeks if you would like to reach out to FCEB. And the joint procurement for this first round will relate to battery electric buses, chargers, both in depot and en route, their supporting infrastructure, and any associated civil works. So very much focused on that battery electric bus technology and supporting items for the round one. But for round two, we have the opportunity to maybe expand the opportunity, working on the foundation that has been established through this first round relating to the battery electric buses, and look towards fuel cell technology and the bus needs across Canada, and perhaps create a round of joint procurement related to those technologies. So that's what we'll be looking forward to expanding upon through Q1 and Q2 of next year. And yeah, I would be happy to answer any questions around FCEB any of you may have. I saw Josipa just shared my email in the chat, and I will turn it back to you, Josipa.
Thank you for that, Jessica. So hopefully that gives everybody the broad view right now of the strategies at play federally and provincially, what our transit members are saying they want us to do, the problematic of getting these very expensive hydrogen fuel cell buses out the door, along with very expensive green hydrogen, which we need to get out the door, the need to achieve high volume to reduce cost over time, and also achieve federal and provincial electrification decarbonization goals. And it seems like, and is starting to look like, a natural landscape for CUTRIC to act, because we have built 3 years around launching a FCEB joint procurement initiative that is getting out the door, and so far, knock on wood, working really well. So with that, we're going to now turn to our rapid fire roundtable. Some of you may have noticed that originally in this agenda, we also had a 10-minute overview of our modeling from our Route I 3.0, which compares battery electric buses to fuel cell bus predictive performance and empirical performance from empirical data we received. That session is a full 1-hour session that we had scheduled at our conference. And due to a few logistical constraints, we ended up moving that session out of the conference agenda. And so today was supposed to be a 10-minute summary of it. Instead, what we're going to do, because the full 1 hour was not reviewed at our conference, we're actually going to schedule the full 1-hour review of that detailed empirical outcome and predictive outcome in our third session in this webinar series in the early new year. So stay tuned for that if you're interested in that quantitative analysis of BEV versus fuel cell e-bus in predictive and empirical. That will be coming up with our colleague Roberto Sardenberg and our zero emissions bus consulting team from our own predictive modeling work with some of the transit agencies that Tatash interviewed and presented the outcomes vis-a-vis earlier in this section. What we're going to do now is turn to the folks on the line. We do have several folks on the line here across transit agencies. I know that our colleagues at Edmonton Transit were able to stay for about half of it, and then they got pulled into another meeting. We've got lots of folks on the line from colleagues at Brampton, Northwest Territories, EXO in Quebec, Strathcona in Alberta, Medicine Hat, Coast Mountain Bus out in British Columbia, Red Deer, Niagara Falls, North Bay, Saskatoon, so more transit agencies than I can list here, as well as all the way out to Halifax and our colleagues in the Maritimes. And for those of you who have not been able to stay for the whole thing, of course, you will get the materials. Our only question to you now, as our members or non-members, but especially transit agencies, are, given what you've heard, given the input so far, we are of the mind that we should launch the FCEB Joint Procurement Initiative for fuel cell bus joint procurement in 2023. Our question to you is, should we be doing that? And you may come from a competitive industry group that's about to indicate to us why we shouldn't do that as a nonprofit entity. We have several government colleagues on the line here today. You may choose to participate in the dialogue or simply observe. We respect both positions. The result of the quick, rapid focus group that we're about to break out into, it's a 10-minute roundtable of folks on the line. We're going to compile those results. They are anonymized, not by agency or person, but by individual input that's then aggregated. And that report will be put together. It goes into our business strategy for next year. It goes to our federal government colleagues, and it also goes out to our membership and our transit agencies to determine the pathway forward for 2023. So with that, my colleague Karen Moss is going to split us up into 4 groups. There are 4 moderators, about 10 minutes for your feedback, which means about 1 minute answers per person on the line. It's fairly rapid fire. You probably have a very clear yes, no answer that you can give us. So with that, over to you, Karen. And once we're into those groups, your moderators will guide you through and then pull us back out to conclude the session. Thank you very much, Karen. And just stand by. You'll shortly see yourself put into a room. All right. Hi, everyone. I hear a couple groups got done really quickly. A few were quite loquacious and went on. We tried to standardize as much as possible. For those of you who are finished a little bit earlier, hopefully you had a chance to get to know our team in the plenary room. So with that, I'm going to start off. We're going to do a quick high-level overview of the feedback that we received. Thank you so much to the transit agencies that provided their insight. And then we had several private sector partners on the call as well, feeding in their insight as to whether it's feasible or not. So I'll just start off with group number 1. Group number 1 had in the room colleagues from Brampton Transit, Burlington Transit, Winnipeg Transit, and we also had in the room colleagues from ChargePoint, Plan Group, and New Flyer. So that was very helpful to us to have all of your insights. Overall, the sense we got and the feedback was there's value in exploring a joint procurement. There would be value in exploring the extent to which price point reductions on the bus side could occur through a standardized, everybody agreed to the shell of the bus approach, whether it's local, regional, or national. The other component, though, that's more important is that joint procurement around green hydrogen to bring that price point down and drive up supply chain. But we also heard that that could be very challenging because there really isn't a lot of green hydrogen right now, and Western transit agencies are generally looking at blue, not green. So is there any merit? And we might be adding complexity to something where transit agencies already have the ability to joint procure buses. So is this going to add value, or is it just going to add complexity into an already complex landscape? Lastly, we heard that from the industry side, there could be value here. And if we move down this pathway, a lot of supporters for it, but we would need to reassess if it makes sense in 5-10 years for this to continue, or whether the market's mature enough for it to take hold on its own. So with that, that is group 1. I'm going to turn to my colleagues in group 2. Over to Nadia.
Thank you, Josipa. I'm just trying to switch my screens here. Here we go. So really, in summary, great conversation, and it was unanimous that this joint procurement would be valuable. The discussion really surrounded on kind of the smaller, medium-sized transit agencies that, it's easier on the supply chain, empirical data analysis, and the strength in numbers, right? There are resource issues, and they don't have large departments to undertake the fuel cell procurement solo. So it is better that if they are part of a joint procurement. And again, just the re-emphasis on this whole piece of uptake, and then the issue around change management, right? And so the whole discussion around the point of view that Q-Trip could actually help to support that. So that was some great discussion that we had in our group.
Very helpful, Nadia. I think we heard that too, the smaller agencies really needing that outsourced support. So next, we're going to go to group number 3, and that is over to my colleague, Jessica.
Yes, our group actually continued along very much in the same vein. There was unanimous support for proceeding with this kind of a joint procurement. And a couple points were raised around just the need to bring down the price point and the cost and affordability aspects around adopting this type of technology, as well as the desire to be able to come together, not just to bring the price point down, but to also gain additional insight and information on how the buses and the technology would be able to work in conditions that are very Canadian, specifically cold weather conditions. Having more information and understanding of how it would work throughout all seasons, including wintertime, was something that was reiterated quite a bit throughout our group. And also the need to solve this with collaboration and a clear understanding of availability and the supply chains for the hydrogen as well.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Jessica. And last but not least, Mediev, your group was quite small, I think, so you may have finished up a little bit early, but let's see what we got from the 4th group.
Yeah, sorry for those who arrived a lot earlier than the others in the main room. Yeah, we had people from Metrobus in St. John, Calgary Transit, the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers, and Global Affairs Canada. And so yeah, as said before, I mean, everybody is for it. That's great. One of the reasons that we're said is because we kind of know more now about the limitations of battery electric buses. And there's as well more openness. People ask more questions about hydrogen. The perception is changing. So this is a good time as well for this. So they were definitely for it as well. It also is good in terms of jobs, you know, and supporting different types of new jobs pretty much in the industry as well. So yeah, and then we discussed a bit the challenges that could go with it. Of course, hydrogen is expensive and it's not available easily across the country, depending on the places. So that was some of the challenges that were kind of discussed in it. But overall, very positive. Yes, everybody's for it, and the timing is good. It is a good time to start looking into that and moving forward.
Thanks so much, Marie-Ève. Interesting to hear. I didn't catch if it was St. John's or St. John, but both of them maritime-based agencies. Exciting to hear about that, and we will make sure to capture those views because one of the big hydrogen hubs, of course, is proposed for the Maritimes. And if you had been watching the news at that time or caught it, we had a pretty critical position on that, which was the discussion of that hydrogen hub, shipping hydrogen off to Germany and Europe, which is all great, but from QTRIC's view, we need to ship it across Canada to our agencies first. So we have a large dialogue ahead with our maritime colleagues to see what we can do to redirect some of that hydrogen to local transit needs if cities are truly expected in order to hit their decarbonization goals. So thanks so much for that, Marie-Ève. I think it was Metrobus in St. John's. That's fantastic. And we have a lot of dialogue to have forward with you folks over there. So with that, we're going to be taking all of this feedback. We're getting our general signal to March, which is great. That's how we like to do it. We will have a third session in actually, we'll go forward one slide just to give it to you before I say the wrong day. I think it's February 21. The third session before we press go and I start putting money into this from membership fees and our general revenues at QTRIC in order to build a joint procurement for fuel cell buses, knowing that it does take a lot of labor and heavy lifting and costing to do it. We're going to have one last session. And in that session, we are going to go through the deep dive modeling of what we have seen predictively of battery versus fuel cell buses. And we will go through what we have empirically in terms of performance of battery. And we're going to see if we can get some of the fuel cell bus performance data from our partners in the United States that have been operating these buses and our partners in Europe that have been operating these buses for several years. So that will give some of the quantitative figures to our transit agencies. So we all go in eyes wide open. We're firm believers in science over sales, and that's going to get us to a decarbonized future better, faster, quicker, and more efficiently than trying to lie to ourselves about how easy this is all going to be. So having said that, we'll take all these results, we'll capture them. You'll all get minutes, you'll get a summary report, you'll get these presentations, and our team will send out a very nice cloud-based Smartsheet register in the future. In particular for our members, you'll be able to access all of this material in a cloud platform, so you're not hunting through your emails for a whole bunch of attachments. With that, I want to thank everyone for their time. I know we draw on a lot of your time, but this is effectively very good business development for us because it makes sure that I'm not spending money on something that will go nowhere fast. Thank you once more. If you have not been interviewed by Tatash in your transit agency or an operator of transit services, and this is on your strategic plan, if you can connect with Tatash, she'll put her email here in the chat. In particular, I'm thinking our colleagues in St. John's with Metrobus may be a very valuable interview participant if we haven't captured them already, and any others we would love to get you into that qualitative output for business planning and guidance to the federal government. With that, I'm going to conclude the session and thank you again for your time. We'll call to adjournment the meeting here at 2:28 Eastern time zone, and we will see you all on February 21st. Thank you to the QTRIC team, the moderators, and the participants. Have a great holiday season. Stay safe, get vaccinated, and avoid illness. So we'll see you in the new year. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Josipa.
Thank you. Have a good day.